Welcome to Sports Talk Live Buffalo Plus. I'm Sports Director John Scott. Bills beginning OTAs this week. Vic Ferrucci and I will get into the main talking points from what we saw and heard out in Orchard Park. But first, Paul Hamilton still on the top line, even though the Sabres season now coming to a close here. Paul, it was a heck of a ride no one has been on for quite some time here. But unfortunately, it ends in Buffalo sports heartbreaking fashion. Overtime, Game 7 at home. Your thoughts on the conclusion in that sort of a fashion?
Well, it's just so final, but for every team except one, the Stanley Cup winner, it is very final that you get eliminated, and especially Game 7 in overtime for it to happen then. So, it was a disappointment for the fans, but also what Lindy Ruff and Jarmo Kekalainen also said was, it shouldn't have been overtime for one goal. You lost 3 games at home, and that really hurts, especially when you were in Game 5 ahead, and then all of a sudden you just let Montreal take over the game. So there were other reasons why they lost that series. It was more than having a Game 7, losing on one shot. Yeah, that all happened, but they felt it never should have got that far, and because they should have played well enough to win one of those home games and go home before Game 7.
Your thoughts on the Malenstein no goal?
Yeah, I just don't understand. The referee was looking at the same thing I was looking at the same thing Malenstein was looking at. We all had the same angle. The puck was not frozen. It was sitting in the crease when the whistle blew. And it's like, why? What do you do? Because Malenstein even said when he talked about it that he didn't understand either, because he's looking at the puck and puts it in as he's going to put the puck in. He hears the whistle. It's like, why are we blowing the whistle here? So now, that didn't lose the game for Buffalo. What that did was it didn't give them a chance to defend a 1-goal lead in the last 10 minutes of the game, something they do very well. They also score goals in empty nets very well if it would have gotten down to that. Or maybe Montreal pulls their goalie and ties the game and it goes to overtime anyway. You don't know. But the Sabres are very good at holding on to 1-goal leads. The place would have gone crazy. They were deprived that opportunity to at least try to hold a 1-goal lead.
Another moment, Lindy Ruff identifying as one he thought was going to turn the game. Tage Thompson all alone. And we come to find out Thompson dealing with back issues throughout the series and maybe the playoffs as a whole. Kind of a microcosm, though, of Thompson in that series in particular. So the Sabres' return to the postseason is now over after winning their opening round series against Boston in 6 games, pushing the Canadiens in the second round to OT of Game 7. Paul, what do you think of how this young, inexperienced team, those were the big talking points heading into the playoffs, how do you feel they handled it?
Well, in some places good, some places bad, but it's something that you need to have. The late John Muckler has told me that the playoffs are a process, and it's the same thing for the Sabres. A lot of these things were firsts for them that they had never experienced before. So they learned through it, and they're going to be better for it. Next time they're in the playoffs, the things that, were unexpected before, they'll know. If they happen to play Montreal, they know what they're in for in Montreal. They don't have to experience first and go, uh-oh, this is crazy, type of a thing. So those experiences will make you better the next time. And if you're a Sabre fan, you're hoping next time is next year. And there's so many examples of that. Tampa Bay getting swept in the first time there, and then they win 2 cups after that. Florida losing the first time there, and they win 2 cups after that. You can go back for almost year after year after year, examples of teams that have to do that. So it was a good experience for them. They passed some of the tests. They didn't pass some of the tests that was too much for them. But overall, I think it was a positive experience.
I think you could look at both series and say when they lost, it was more of their undoing, more on their mistakes than it was what their opponent, whether that be the Bruins or the Canadiens, were doing. And I think experience probably played a big role in that, in whether it was lending your emotions, getting caught up in the non-calls, or what the refs were doing, getting into some of these scraps against Boston and losing your focus. I think that, Paul, is going to be an area that they can take the learning experiences from and carry forward.
The Game 5 where they had the lead and scored the 3 goals in the first period, Lindy Ruff said that it was very uncharacteristic the way they started turning the puck over. Their puck management was very uncharacteristic there. He goes, what we started doing is fueling Montreal's offense. We gave that to them. They didn't have that. But then we start fueling their offense, getting their speed going, getting them some confidence. Now they're scoring some goals, and it changes the whole thing around. He goes, and that's very uncharacteristic for the way this team has played since December.
One of the dynamics that we were really seeing players, Lindy, Jarmo Kekalainen, kind of balance during their final remarks heading into the offseason was the disappointment of how the season ended, while also trying to appreciate and reflect on the incredible accomplishments of the season as a whole. So let's do that ourselves and zoom out. Obviously, the headline is ending the 14-season playoff drought, longest in league history, and not just doing so, sneaking in, winning the Atlantic Division. We know where they came from, dead last in the Eastern Conference early in December. When you look back at this season in its totality, what stands out? They
went on a run that had never been done in Sabre history, starting at December 9th. They were the best team in the league by a lot. They didn't even get to 10 losses in that time. And really, really played well. Both their goaltenders were very, very good in that time period. They basically split the time, and both had very high save percentages and did very well. So that had never really been done. When that started, they were in last place in the Eastern Conference. They climbed to second place in the Eastern Conference and won the Atlantic Division. So just that accomplishment to all of a sudden figure out, go to Calgary, have a meeting with the captains, and they decide, let's stop complaining. Let's start just going out and playing hockey the way hockey is supposed to be played. And from that point forward, it all turned around for them. Now they're the hunted, though. And that was, I think, Lindy Ruff's one of his bigger messages to the team as they were set off to decompress and get rested and all of that is you kind of just jumped and popped out of nowhere, and teams weren't expecting it, and they had expected for over a decade, we're coming to Buffalo, we're coming to Key Bank, they're coming to our building. It's kind of an easy breezy night off. It's a different game now for them. How do you expect them to handle or even approach the idea over these next coming months of preparing themselves for that change as a team that is not sneaking up on anyone? They were not hard to play against for many, many years. They are now. They are difficult to play against, and that's what they were looking for, is other teams know they've been in a hockey game when they've come to Buffalo. Win or lose, they know they've been in a hockey game. The Sabres are not going to back down. If you want to mix it up, they'll be there with you. Whether they win that mix-up, who knows? But they'll be there with you, and they have shown the NHL. Lindy Ruff put together an offensive system. He's the only one running it, and it messed teams up. The way he would rotate in the offensive zone. You didn't know if a defenseman was going to be in front of the net. You didn't know where he was going to be because they had forwards covering up, and it was almost like a rotation. Well, now teams will have the summer to look at that. And, okay, this is what we need to do to defense that. It's not going to be, uh-oh, what's this type of a thing. So, the Sabres will have to adjust to that. So other teams are going to be preparing now for the Buffalo Sabres in the offseason, where I don't think the Buffalo Sabres name was even mentioned in meetings in the offseason before. Rightfully so. You mentioned Lindy Ruff and the offensive scheme that he developed. He pushed a lot of other buttons that worked incredible this entire season and ultimately rewarded with a 2-year contract extension yesterday. And this, Paul, was more of a matter of, does Lindy Ruff at 66, going to be 67 next year, want to continue coaching? Not do the Sabres want him to come back and be on the bench once again? There was one person's decision. It wasn't Jarmo Kekalainen, it wasn't Lindy Ruff's. It was Lindy Ruff's wife. If she was okay with it, let's go. As Kekalainen said, for him it was a no-brainer. So, and Lindy Ruff wanted to do it, but he needed to check with his wife to make sure that she was on board with it. As she told him, it's an illness. You have it. You need to do it. Let's go. So from that point forward, he knew he was going to take the contract. We saw him help nurture and guide these inexperienced young group to the uncharted territories of the postseason. Now what can Lindy Ruff do with his experience and grip on this team to help continue to push them forward? Well, to let them know that now they're the front runners. They're not the guys surprising people anymore. We don't know what the roster is going to look like. We do know it'll be different. It's different every year. There will be some changes on the roster. We don't know what they will be, but there will be some changes. What does Kekalainen think they need to do to become a better team? That's what he's going to do right now. Does he have to make a trade to make this team better? Does putting the youngsters on it make this team better? So that's what he has to examine. How do I take this team to the next level?
We did a lot of looking back here in this past segment. Monday, once we get Adam back in the mix over on Channel 2 Sports Talk Live, we're going to start projecting forward. That's where we are going to discuss what I think is a difficult decision about Alex Tuck. We hear they're going to keep 3 goalies. We also heard about Devin Levi. There's an article out on The Athletic today. Kevin Adams' first comments reflecting on his time and what this team is now doing. We will get into all of that on Monday. We wanted to kind of do a recap here, looking back one final time. All right, that'll do it for Paul now. It's time to turn our attention to the Bills. OTAs now underway. Let's discuss some of the team's new and old. Vic Carucci tagging in here next on Sports Talk Live Plus. Welcome back here to Sports Talk Live Plus. Vic Carucci now in the hot seat as we shift to the Bills. One quick programming note. I was having a brain fart. We will not have a show on Channel 2 on Monday. It is Memorial Day, so we will have a week off from that, but we'll be back here next Thursday. All right, now back to our regularly scheduled programming, if I get my mind right here. First week of Bills OTAs now in the books. Our first look at the team as a whole, this new version out there actually on the field this offseason. Let's start with the biggest change, Vic, and that is head coach Joe Brady. I kind of joked, a big change he's already bringing in. He's now a guy who's going to stand at the podium for all of his press conferences rather than sit at the table here. But just in general, it seems like when you talk to players, and we've heard it throughout the entire offseason, it's Brady carrying over the vibes and kind of just a breath of fresh air within the building.
No question. He has to put his signature on this team immediately. This is not a thing that sort of, you morph into or it's going to be gradual. He's got to do it right away, and he knows that. And, we saw during the draft, for instance, where he was walking into the media room before the start of each of the first 2 rounds, at least that when I was there, chatting with the media. It was just casual stuff, fun stuff, but it gave you a sense that, look, this guy knows he is new to the role, even though he's not new to the team, and has to establish something. And I think these off-season workouts, these OTAs, are where, one, of course, he's got to make his connection with the team. And, the new players, it's the same for any coach, but the veterans, not hearing that Sean McDermott voice, not getting or following a plan that had been in place for the better part of 9 years. Not that all those players have been on the team for that long, but you know what I mean. And now this guy gets to do it his way. And I think that standing up for the news conference thing was fun and funny, but I think it just gave you a sense of, okay, I'm going to do things my way.
There were some structural issues about the one practice that we saw on Tuesday that was different. They just in the middle of practice started doing like competitive drills, offensive, defensive things that weren't football related. It was like running in a circle like a relay to kind of gather an earnest competition while also some team unity and stuff like that. Just little things there that you just are going to start to pick up as the weeks roll along. Josh Allen back on the field. First time we've seen him since having foot surgery in the offseason. Looked normal and fine to me, but it was just good to see that he's been present from the very beginning and working his way back. Don't have to worry about the injury because also this time of year critical for developing chemistry with new guys like DJ Moore and even rookie Skylar Bell.
I think just being there, just his presence is a big deal for this football team. Again, he's got the history with Joe Brady as a coordinator, but to be part of what really is still a newness with this team and to be part of it with new surrounding cast at receiver, some on the offensive line, just the working with them and just saying, as he did, look, we're going to make mistakes. This is the time to iron them out. This is the time to get these things done. That does and says a lot about his leadership. That does a lot in terms of other players seeing, okay, if the lead dog of this team is that concerned with correcting things and getting things right in May, the rest of us can do that.
You're right. And Joe Brady says, I'm not going to compare DJ Moore to Stephon Diggs by any means, but we saw how the chemistry was able to develop years ago between that connection with Allen rather quickly. They had sensational start to the season and an entire first year and time together. The hope for the Bills and Joe Brady is that that will happen with DJ Moore as well. Staying at wide receiver, Vic, I don't think we've talked about Keon Coleman much at all this entire offseason here. That's a joke.
I know.
We've heard so much from Brandon Beane and Joe Brady and Josh Allen, and that continues to be a topic of conversation. But Tuesday we finally heard from Keon himself. Says, listen, I didn't take much of the Terry Pegula comments. He has not spoken to Terry Pegula since. Terry Pegula has not reached out to Keon, according to Keon himself here. He kind of just brushed it all off and said, I need to focus on myself and getting better because what I have been in particular last season has not been good enough.
My feel of the whole thing is, okay, Terry Pegula said what he said, and it had, in Terry's opinion, a purpose to be said when it was at the firing of Sean McDermott, and just to kind of, in his own way, justify the way things were unfolding. But at the end of it all, this, as much as it was an assumption that, okay, Keon's days have to be numbered if the owner is saying that, the owner of the team is saying that, and as I would say in the aftermath of that, Joe Brady, Brandon Beane couldn't have been and couldn't be more emphatic about supporting this guy. John, I'm not saying this is a conspiracy theorist thing. Maybe it sounds like it, but I think this was their way, and I'm sure with the owner of the team's blessing, of kind of cleaning that up.
Yeah, I always give Keon credit that he's had missteps, and he stands in front of cameras and in front of the interviews and media, and he takes on the questions and he answers them. It's not always the most articulate. It's not maybe exactly what you think necessarily should be said. He's very good, especially this time of year, and we saw it last year, being reflective and honest at evaluating his own performance. I thought that happened once again.
And he called it a make or break season for him. Duh, it is. And everyone knows it, and he knows it. That's the most important thing. But how he responds to it is going to be the thing. Will there still be this habitual lateness for meetings? And will there be a more grown-up approach by him? Those are all the things that we're going to just see how they unfold.
Last offseason, we talk about Keon Coleman, and then naturally we'd go to another pass catcher, and that would be Dalton Kincaid. Lo and behold, a year later, we're still following up the Keon Coleman dialogue with that of Dalton Kincaid. Health is going to always be the number one talking point with Kincaid. He chose not to get surgery on his PCL injury, a knee injury that has hampered him not just this past season, but 2 seasons ago as well. Said he spoke with many doctors who advised him not to do it. I will say this, and we'll show you the video. He looks bigger and stronger than we've seen him in the past. Is that enough to maybe curtail the concerns that this guy is not going to be available?
I don't know about that. I'd say added body armor is a good thing in the NFL, particularly for a guy who has been repeatedly injured in the NFL. But his knee is his knee. If that betrays him again, would we be surprised? No, because it's been a repeated issue. I won't argue with what he's been told medically, because what do I know as far as it's a good idea to have surgery. Good. I mean, you go by what you're told by the experts. So he did, but we'll see. And here's the thing, John, the unfortunate part of that, now that that's public, if it happens again, there are going to be those questions. Okay, well then why did you listen? If in fact it was the same knee was injured the same way.
He takes it as a point of pride that he's never actually had any procedures done throughout his entire football career. I'm not saying, and he did not say, that's why he has not gotten this procedure done. I think everyone wants to avoid going under the knife, so it makes complete sense here. If he can build up the strength around the knee, which is the plan, and then there is a plan in place between he and the medical staff of the Bills to almost not load management per se, but at least leading into the regular season, do what they can to not put him in harm's way.
Well, I think that's a must, and obviously we've heard it talked about, Brandon Beane, among others, who's who've just discussed it. But here's the thing, John, it still comes back to this. 86 has got to be a massive part of what the passing game is going to show. And you know, DJ Moore added, fine. Will Keon Coleman step up? Okay. Yeah, Khalil Shakir's still there. Yada, yada. Bell was drafted. But it really still comes down to, and I know Dawson Knox is also still a part of this team, but Dalton Kincaid holds the key. And if he's not the guy playing the best football and available for most of the time, I think it will be a problem.
OTA is continuing next week as well. All right, we're going to get Paul back in here and go 3 wide here as we have a media conversation to have. Vegas getting docked for denying media access. We're talking Golden Knights and access media talk next here on Sports Talk Live Plus. Going old school here to wrap things up on this edition of Sports Talk Live Plus. Paul back with Vic and myself here. The Vegas Golden Knights penalized by the NHL for what they called flagrant violations of their media policy. They're docked a second-round pick. John Tortorella, their head coach, fined $100,000 because he didn't speak after they closed out the Anaheim series. Very few players failed to speak after closing out the Anaheim series. And this is more of a dynamic overall, because we're all in locker rooms. We all have to deal with access and dealing with teams and their cooperation. Paul, will start from an NHL standpoint. Sabres are pretty good, but this is always a dynamic that we're dealing with.
Yeah, they were mad because McNabb got suspended, and that was their way of dealing with it. I am very happy to see the league for once did the right thing. They did not. I thought for sure that number 2 pick would either be dropped or turned into like a 5th or a 6th round pick. But they kept the penalties the way they are on the appeal, which I think is important.
You know, given the way coaches at the major league level, NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, hockey, the way they're paid, coaches and players, of course, fines don't do a thing. Taking away a draft pick, that's punishment, and that's where the team feels it. And so I applaud the NHL for taking that drastic a measure by taking that second round pick away. I can't even fathom, and it's happened in the NFL, you know, teams have lost picks. I can't even fathom how an NFL team would react to losing a second round pick over a media issue. Right,
little behind the curtain thing, at least with the NFL, a player kind of gets a little leeway. Oh, you didn't do it if there's a complaint filed through the media, the Pro Football Writers. Okay, you get a warning, then you get another warning, then maybe you get a fine, and things go to that. Rarely does it ever reach that point. But as you said, money doesn't do anything for these guys, and they're making this much. When you start docking things that can impact your ability to build a team, that's where it is. It's just an interesting maybe trickle down that maybe puts everyone else in other leagues on notice.
And just for the record, would we agree, okay, we're the ones asking the questions and the mic, holding the mics or whatever, cameras. They're talking to the fans. I mean, we're conduit there. I'm going to say it. I mean, that's who you're not talking to.
100%.
Not punishing John or Paul.
All right, we will be back next Thursday, not Monday. We'll see you next Thursday.